Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Susan McGuire, Director of Professional Development at ACCE, and I'm happy to welcome you to this afternoon's webinar. In today's webinar, we'll be covering journey mapping. Each of your members is on a journey to fulfill their expectations of their new chamber membership or renewal. In this second of our two-part membership series, led by CATHI HIGHT, learn to use journey maps to onboard new members, increase engagement, and build your chamber's leadership pipeline. As I mentioned, this is the second in CATHI's two-part series, and you may recall that the first webinar in this series was in the fall of 2018 on member personas, and CATHI will build on her presentation on member personas. But before I turn the program over to CATHI, I have a few housekeeping notes. First, attendees are in listen-only mode during the webinar to avoid background noise. And second, after the presentation, we'll have time for questions, which you can ask by using the question function of the webinar. The question box is on the lower right-hand corner of your screen. Just type in your question, and I will read the question to CATHI. So you can feel free to type in the question anytime during the presentation as it occurs to you. She'll take the questions at the end of her presentation. And if we get a lot of questions and CATHI just can't get to all of them, we will reach out to you if you've typed one in and it hasn't been answered yet. CATHI will also have her contact information on one of the last slides, and so you can feel free to reach out to her directly. Third, this webinar is being recorded, and it should be up on the ACC website on the ACC University webinar page, which I hope you're familiar with, by Monday, April 15th. I'll also include the presentation slides used today, and I'll also have a link to the recording of CATHI's fall 2018 webinar on member personas. And in addition, the webinar slides are also uploaded to the webinar panel on the right-hand side of your computer screen. If you click the little triangle next to the word handouts, you can click on the presentation and download it if you'd like. If you'd rather just watch and listen, that's perfectly fine, and you can download the slides from the website when I post them. So with that, I would like to introduce our speaker. CATHI HIGHT is president of HIGHT Performance Group, and she provides strategies to help chambers evolve, deliver benefits that members value, and effectively communicate the value of membership. Her expertise in strategic planning, membership development, and organizational realignment has contributed to the success of many ACC Chamber of the Year award winners. She's the author of the Member Retention Kit and A New Approach to Tiered Membership, and is a sought-out speaker and consultant. She's had a diverse career experience, which includes serving as the Senior Vice President of Growth Strategy for the Austin Chamber, a VP of Operations for the Chamber of Commerce of Hawaii, Regional Sales and Marketing Manager for Dole Foods and Dean Foods, National Manager for the Kauffman Foundation's Fast Track Entrepreneurship Program, and a Motorola University instructor for continuous improvement. CATHI served as a national trainer for ACCE for membership development and has been an instructor for the U.S. Chamber of Commerce's Institute for Organization Management for over 15 years. CATHI holds a Bachelor of Science degree in Human Development from the University of Hawaii. So thank you again for being here today, CATHI. It's always great to have you, and I will pass the program over to you now.
Great. Thanks, Susan. And I'm so glad that we have a great turnout. And like we said, we're building on the webinar from the fall. I will touch on some aspects that I'd like to carry over to this webinar, just so there's some continuity, and because I think there might be some few questions as we talk a little bit about some of the process. And so I will touch on that as well, but I'm really glad that everybody is here with us today. And thank you. Thank you for joining us. So as she said, she covered all of that, so that's great. You don't need the introduction, but that information's there on the background for the slides when you get them. So that's wonderful. But let's get right into today's webinar. So our objectives today is to recognize member journeys, and that's through the member's eyes and how the experiences of our members can deliver or exceed on their expectations, and for you to consider how member journey maps can streamline first-year member onboarding process and increase engagement and retention. And our third objective is to discover 3 different types of member journey maps that positively shape our members' experiences. I always like to start off with some questions just to kind of frame the conversation that we're going to have. And these are probably some questions that would come up as we talk about journey maps. So first question, what's a journey map? How does it impact membership? How can we deliver on the expectations of first-year members? Because we know that's where we tend to lose most of our members. And how can journey maps increase member engagement? So as we think about that, we'll get into our webinar today, and hopefully we're going to answer all of those questions. So let's start with, what are journey maps? And you might have heard about journey maps before, but I'm going to kind of walk through what they are. And for those of you that don't have an understanding of journey maps, if that's a new concept for you, then we're certainly going to cover it and just make sure that we're all on the same page when we talk about journey maps. So what kind of journey map? Now, of course, I think most of us are familiar with the type of map that's on the left, right? So whether we're going on Google Maps and we're trying to figure out, here's where we are, here's where we want to go, and what are the different ways to get there? Well, concept is sort of similar to that, except we're going to be talking about a little bit of a different use when we talk about a journey map, because we're going to be thinking about a customer journey. And customer journey maps have actually, this concept has been around for quite some time, and it's been very popular. If you didn't look so much at membership, or even if you did Google member journey map, you're going to see a lot of resources about customer journey maps. And you're going to see a lot of applications because believe it or not, they're already being done in a number of different approaches. If you belong to a membership site, it's very popular in terms of sales and marketing, and also in software applications, the credit unions. So I think it's a little slow to come into what I would call the association space, although I will tell you that there are a lot of associations that have been embarking on this type of process over the last couple of years. And I think a little more slow to the chamber industry in particular. I think it's a brand new concept really in the chamber space, but the concept of journey mapping has taken place for a long time. And so basically we're kind of looking at phases of a customer journey, and for that would be our members. And there are multiple types of journeys that our members could take, and so that's really what we're talking about, is what are those phases and what should happen along their journey in order for it to be a great experience for them. So kind of keep that in mind, and keep that map concept in mind though too, because there certainly is a starting place, although a journey could happen anytime while someone's a member. So what exactly are member journey maps? What are we talking about here? Well, a member journey map, that's how we're going to explain it, really is a visual interpretation of that experience that we're hoping that our members have. And they're always done from the member's perspective. You could certainly create your own map of where you want your members to go, and you can keep that in mind, but when you create a map, it really needs to be from the members. So this is their journey, and we can't forget that. And based on their motivation, it's going to describe the stages or phases that they go through and their emotions. How are they feeling during this journey? And what types of anticipated channels or interactions do we want to think about using, and what the outcomes might be. Of course, we can think about outcomes in terms of what we want, but how members react and what actions they take could be a little bit different. And there could be a timeline that we're really trying to stay within, or sort of map the journey from point A, let's say, to point Z. Journey maps are also used to understand different members' needs and interests, and certainly kind of help navigate for them some positive win-win engagements, right? We want them to have a great experience, and we also want it to be a win for the chamber as well. The other great thing about journey maps is it really creates a shared organization-wide understanding. So it's not just the membership team, but it's other people in your organization really sort of understanding this concept of the journey and what's going to happen for the member and how it impacts, different staff members or departments. So it's really meant to be their journey with the chamber, not just with a particular person, and certainly not just with the membership person. So the first thing that you have to ask yourself is, who is on the journey? And I know that we tend to have member companies as members, but the company's not on a member journey. It's usually a particular person, right? So maybe it's the primary contact. Maybe it's the person who's most active, who's representing that organization. So it could be the owner. It could be their marketing person or their policy person. It could be their business reps, right? So whoever is actually the ones that we're trying to engage, we have to think of them as people. So a company is not on the journey. There are people who are on the journey. So we have to think about, well, which segments of our members are on this journey, because we can kind of think about members who share something in common as having a similar journey, but the question is, who are they? What trigger or prompted them on this journey, whether it's the journey to join, whether it's their first year of membership, whether it's someone we're cultivating for a leadership experience. But we want to think about the trigger. What's making them engage, and what kind of expectations do they have? And again, what's important to them, right? What matters? And what is it that we want them to experience on this journey? And then we have to think about who needs to be involved from our side. So we understand who the customer is, which is whoever that member representative is, and who are they touching in our organization. So we need to think about that as well, because there's a good chance as they interact with different parts of the chamber that they might be interacting with different people. And one thing we know about our members is they're not all the same. So different members, and I mean even within individuals within our member companies, have different motivations for wanting to be engaged with us. So the CEO maybe has a particular motivation that could be around advocacy or serving more of a leadership capacity. It could be their membership person. It could be a solo entrepreneur. But whoever that person is, they have different motivations, and so we need to think about that. So again, this is a journey. Think about one person or a group of people that are just very similar to one another. They have a motivation, and depending on that motivation, their journey is going to be a little bit different. Which is why in the fall, we talked about member personas. And this concept of a persona is sort of a description. It's a personality, right? So as we sort of look at these groups of members, they have certain attributes, and we want to think about what that is. So I'm going to show you just a couple of slides from our webinar last fall, where we really got deep into looking at all the different types of member personas we could create and how you would go about creating a persona. So for those of you that didn't get a chance to look at that webinar, but like Susan said, there's a link so you can go back and you can listen to the recording and access the slides. But certainly it starts there. We're thinking about who's on the journey, who is the member that we're talking about. Well, personas describe members. And they're fictional. We use pictures and we create a personality. And not to say that every one of your members that's in a similar group looks like that, but behaviorally, they have a lot in common. So this is a fictional representation of these groups of members. Persona should be based on real data, things that you really know about them, like their demographics, right? So it could be their age range. It could be the type of industry they have, what's going on for them, what stage of business are they in, what is it that they want from the chamber, right? So we really want to understand who they are. And what's nice about personas is it allows us to put ourselves into their shoes. What's their life like? What's it like to show up every day in their job or in their role in their companies? So it's a combination of demographics, but it's also just other behaviors, just things that we know about them. And we have to be a little creative because some of the things we don't know about them, but we're speculating, right? A little bit about who they are as people, what's going on in their life, what motivates them, and what kinds of things keep them up at night. Well, these characteristics, like I said, kind of group them together, and that helps us understand who they are as a group that we're trying to serve. And obviously, you're going to need more than one persona. So in the fall webinar, we talked about 6 different types of personas. Not that you have to have a zillion of them, but there's a good chance that you're probably going to have 3 or 4 of them, because you're not going to have just one, because your members, it would be very difficult to cluster into one particular kind of persona. So I'm just going to show you an example of one of the 6, but obviously there's a lot more. And again, going back to that previous webinar is certainly going to help you. So here's an example of a persona. It's probably one that you could really relate to because it makes up the majority of your members, right? So this is Entrepreneur Emily. So Entrepreneur Emily is a solopreneur, right? She's a really small business, and chances are you have a lot of members like this. So we kind of speculated and said, okay, well, so if we're going to put together some demographics about Emily, and of course Emily could be Emilio, okay, it doesn't have to be female, but in this particular persona, we said she's female, and we said, okay, she has a small business, she doesn't have more than 9 employees, and chances are maybe it's just her, maybe it's just 2 people, but it's definitely a very small business. We also said that, this person is probably a first-time entrepreneur, so 28 to 38 years old might be her best guess, that she's married, right, and we come up with an income that we think is sort of the household income. And then what are some things that we want to know about her, or what do we think we know about her? Well, she's probably looking for respect, right, to be respectful as a business owner, even though she's fairly new at it. So we said early stage, doesn't have a lot of business experience, probably doesn't know what she doesn't know, like marketing and things like that. What does she hope to achieve? Well, you know what? She's probably taken on this business venture as a way to make enough money for her family, and also to make sure that she's got money to send her kids to school and retirement. So this is really a big endeavor for her. And what is she looking for? Friends and mentors. Owning your own business is very challenging, and we tend to work a lot of hours. Speaking for myself, of course, and thinking about, the need for balance and trying to run a business and still take care of her personal life. Not to say that anybody in business doesn't struggle with the same thing. Biggest challenges. So, well, this person does everything. Not only are they prospecting, they're closing the leads, they're also servicing those businesses. They probably do all their own bookkeeping. So if you think about it, this person does everything in the business. There aren't multiple departments. This person is it. Even if this person has a franchise of some type, well, they still have goals and quotas. And really the challenge is having enough leads, knowing enough people, right? And not having a lot of money to be able to do marketing. And we think about pain points. So what keeps Emily up at night? Well, time, okay, the credibility, not knowing enough about business, feeling scared about failing after putting so much into this business, and she probably doesn't have a huge circle of influence, right? She doesn't know a lot of people in town or certainly have enough connections. So what does a successful engagement look like for Emily? Well, she wants to have access to these circles of power, right? People who make decisions, people who could buy from her. She's obviously looking for some networking opportunities, looking for people who would refer her, and also some support from some other business owners, and certainly looking for resources and people who could give her some tools and information so that she doesn't necessarily have to do it all alone. So putting yourself in Emily's position and really understanding what's it like in her world, because that's probably 50% of who joins our chamber. So why are the personas important? Well, because we want to understand our members better. We want to understand what it is that they want from us and how we can serve them, and think about what we have to offer that would be beneficial, that would really address some of the things that this particular persona is looking for, and how do we create the best experience possible for them. And that should then help us think about what we offer, right? What are our programs? What are our benefits? What should we be pitching to Emily? What kinds of things should we be inviting her to? What kind of content is appropriate for her in the newsletter and through our programs? What kind of messaging should we be using that would really resonate with this particular persona? And what kind of marketing venues, what channels should we be using? Where would we reach these particular groups of people? And how do we create value, but value being in the eyes of who this persona is? That can certainly help us in terms of how we recruit them and how we engage them and how we retain them. But we have to realize we have more than one persona, right? So we have to be able to do this with each of these persona groups. So that kind of gives you an idea, just sort of in a snapshot, of what we're talking about with personas. And if you want to learn a lot more about the different personas, like I said, we showcase 6 different ones in the fall. How do you go about creating them? Then you want to do a deep dive into the webinar and use the link that Susan provided. So let's continue on with our journey and think about, okay, so if we're going to be talking about journey maps, to kind of understand briefly what a journey map is for our members. So what type of journey maps would we use? Well, there are a few, and we want to just talk only about 2 or 3 just to kind of give us an idea. I don't want you to feel like you're drinking from a fire hose. So let's just kind of think about, okay, if we're going to talk about journey maps, what might those look like? And so I want to show you a couple of them. So here's something that I found on the internet, and I thought it was kind of interesting. It's hard to find member journey maps that are kind of for associations or for chambers, but this one was kind of like an infographic that was shared by MemberClicks, and it's very high level, but at the same time, I think it sort of gives you this general idea, and they're using this map to say, okay, if you were on a journey to get a new AMS, a new association management system, right, a new software or CRM tool, obviously this would be your journey, right? You sort of have a reason why you would be shopping, and you want to think about all the stuff that you need, and obviously you would be evaluating different options, different software options. And then, of course, there's a big jump going to selection. Obviously, there's a whole lot more that would happen between evaluation and selection. You made your choice. Then you would be a whole onboarding period of you getting to use the software and probably all the frustrations you're going to have with conversion and using all the cool features, launching, and then once you launch, obviously you're going to have a lot of issues. So there's going to be that part of the journey, and then you're going to have an evaluation probably on that first year as to whether or not you're satisfied, or it could be every year that you go through this process and thinking about, is this really meeting my needs, or is it time for us to do this journey all over again? But that's a really quick way of looking at a simple journey map, all about the process of buying an AMS. But guess what? I guarantee you that MemberClicks probably has this whole journey mapped, very detailed out, so that because they understand what that process is going to be for you, and how can they make sure that you select them and what support they're going to give you along the way. But it's a nice overview, and it's a nice pictorial way of sort of looking at a map. So let me just show you a couple of journey maps, persona-based, that are really around deciding to join your chamber. And you could certainly come up with something of your own. So this one is really focused on Emily, right? The entrepreneur Emily, which is our typical person who joins. And again, not to say she's necessarily Hispanic, we said the person's probably B2B, although you could have some that are B2C. So, but still, it's like we just try to come up with this sort of mental image, and having a picture is important because it kind of makes it sort of feel personal. And then we kind of took some of the aspects that we had around what's going on with Emily. So once we built out that persona, we kind of started to create this map of how can we kind of help Emily join, right? So this is one of the maps that we developed for the Austin Chamber. And again, thinking about 6 personas, we actually have 6 different prospect journey maps because we're thinking, okay, they're not all going to look like this, but this is Emily, and we have a lot of people like Emily. So then what we do is we try to kind of put ourselves in Emily's shoes, and we're saying that there's really sort of these, we kind of said 5 stages, although really the last stage or phase is sort of the beginning of the first year member journey. But we said, okay, in the very beginning, doesn't matter which persona we're talking about, there's a discovering, right? There's a discovering stage when that person is thinking about, you know what, I really think that I'm kind of interested, looking for a group, an organization to join. So that discovering is all about, sort of looking for something. Considering is that about, it's sort of looking at what the different options are, or who should I talk to. And then there's the evaluating, comparing options, looking at the website, really deciding how I want to join, which option seems to be the best. If you have a tiered model, they're probably looking at it. And then the actual joining process, and then get to onboarding. So part of that is really getting into the emotions. So we're looking at the emotions for Emily. And using quotes is a great way to personalize, to think about, what do you, like if this person was talking, what would they be saying? And really put yourself in their shoes and really think about that. And the journey process, so kind of, this is maybe just some activities that they might be doing. And then touch points. If you're really trying to reach out to Emily, where are the different touch points that she would probably be interacting with your chamber? And looking at opportunities and outcomes and thinking about that for how Emily's approaching it, and then what kind of outcomes is she going to get out of each of these phases, right? So a simple map. This is all done on one page, and 8.5 by 14. But for us to sort of create a map and think about Emily deciding to join. This is a different persona. This is Advocate Andy. And, this could be the owner of a company, but the whole thing is that, Andy is really interested in, maybe he's just fed up, maybe he's just concerned about what's going on with policies and regulations. So that could be a big reason why this person should join the chamber, right? But we're just saying, okay, if we think about Advocate Andy, in this case, we're just saying, okay, this guy is, we said 53 is an average, but we're thinking, he's like 45 to 60 years old. And so we'll just kind of put us into his world. And he's really just sort of thinking about what's going on in town and not having enough time to really sort of keep up on what's going on. He's going to depend on word of mouth. So he's probably going to talk to different people, and sort of find out, hey, how are you staying on top of all the things that are going on with public policy? Or, I'm really upset about this. What about you? Hey, I read this article. So you kind of put yourself in Andy's place and thinking about, where is he getting information and how would he get to know about the chamber? And if he came to the chamber, what kinds of things would he be looking for? And where would he find it? Okay, so we're kind of looking at it from his eye. So he's not looking at leads, and that type of connections and promoting his business. He's looking at it from, I really want to have a handle on what's going on in town and figure out how it's impacting my business, and how do I make sure that my voice gets heard with all of these decision makers, so that the impact to my business is more positive. So coming at it from his particular point, we do have also a CEO Charlie persona that's in the mix. So but we just said, this could be the CEO, but not always. Sometimes in a corporate business or company, there is somebody whose job is public policy, whether their title is legal counsel or director of government affairs or public affairs, but there is this particular individual in a company, and the way that he would engage with the chamber is very, very different since compared to some other people that might be interacting. But his company might join. He's just a particular user. But if he was the one making the choice to join, this would be his considerations as he thinks about joining. A great resource for you, and I did put links on the book that if you click on it, you'll be able to go to the website. But Mark Levin and Sue Froggatt, they do more work in the association space, not really in the chamber world, but they wrote a great book. It's not a long book. It's an easy read. I'd recommend that you get it. It's probably about $30, but I think it's really, really well spent, because in this book, they talk about membership mapping and a little bit more about it, why it's important. It's probably the only book that I've seen that's written specifically for associations about membership mapping. Like I said, it's hard to find these kinds of resources. And they talk about 3 types of journey maps in this book. The first one is that decision to join, so kind of a prospect's journey map. And then they have this one that's on the first year of onboarding, first year experience for members. And then their third one is the journey to volunteer leadership, which is also very, very good. So this gives you really a nice overview of mapping, and then kind of walks you through how to build these 3 types of maps. It doesn't get into the personas. It's the only sort of thing that I felt was kind of missing from it. But I think their focus was really generically on understanding mapping experiences and how that you could create or focus on 3 different types of experiences or journeys and map that out. So I think it's really well done, and I think kind of gives you a really good overview, and also some great information. Although I would tell you that the decision to join the prospecting that they have in there, they do have Wichita Falls Chamber in there as an example. So I'm not sure how that came to be, but that made me feel really good, because that would be great. And there were a number of us when I worked for the Austin Chamber. He came to town and did a seminar in Austin, and we sent about 6 people to that because we knew we were going to be doing this process. And so that was really helpful too, to go to a half-day seminar. But I don't know how many of them he does a year. Okay, so he talks about that first year, and this, and what he is saying, he and Sue are saying in this book, Mark, is that there are 4 phases of first year member journey. There's the welcoming, so that first 90 days of a brand new member, and as you know, that's probably the most important phase for a brand new member. And he's talking about on the top, in that second row, in the member's anticipations, he tells you to really put yourself in that new member's shoes and think about what's going on for them. And if they just joined in the first 90 days, what are they thinking about? What's important to them? And that's really, I joined, now what, right? And then on the bottom row is really about, if you understand where they are, then how are you going to help them navigate this particular phase of the journey? So welcoming, connecting would be the second phase. making sure before the 6-month mark that they have found, whatever that community is, whatever the programs are, whatever the groups are. So thinking about the fact that they're looking for a place to connect. And so how do we then help them? The Austin Chamber created an engagement guide specifically for that purpose that really describes everything the Chamber offers and how to access it. And so that engagement guide was very helpful for onboarding, but we also use it for members who are not engaged because they don't know how to plug in. And so it started off being for the first-year members, but it's been used in a lot of different ways. Obviously, the engaging phase would continue. It would be our hope, because we know that there is a link between engagement and retention. As long as they engage in a place or in a meaningful way that creates value for them. And then probably about the 9th or 10th month, they're already in the reviewing phase. So how can we make sure that we're helping with that reviewing evaluation so that they do want to renew and continue that journey with us? I was pleased to listen to a presentation at the ACCE Sales Conference in Dallas just a week or so ago, where the West Coast Chamber in Michigan, and their whole presentation was on the new member journey, and also sort of leveraging some personas to help with attracting members, but and then really about messaging to those members. So I was really pleased to see that, because I think that's kind of like a mid-sized chamber, so lots of great lessons learned there. They did an awesome job. And so this is their new member journey, kind of mapping that out for the year. They didn't, they're just saying, here's what they're going to do along the way, in kind of more of a calendar format in terms of what their touch points might be. So I'd recommend that you sort of think about the slide that I just showed in this one to actually kind of create a process around first year member and journey maps. I think that kind of gives you an idea. To me, I think these would be probably the two probably first places to start, I think, is thinking about prospecting and what that journey map might look like, depending on who you're trying to attract. And then think about your first year member journey. And again, I think if you keep the personas in mind, certainly the way that you would onboard a CEO, Charlie, or an advocate, Andy, would not be the same way that you would onboard entrepreneur Emily. So I think you do have to think about who the people are to make sure that the appropriate touch points and the way that you try to connect them is meaningful for them. So that's a lot. That's a lot to think about, right? But I want us to kind of maybe think about, if we were going to distill our journeys for our members, maybe into 3 paths, what might be the most common path? Like I said, you can't create a path for every single member. So you have to think about, well, where could I get the concentration so that I could have fewer maps, but then make them meaningful to those groups of people. So let's kind of think about common journey experiences, like once they joined, okay, let's kind of go past the onboarding part. When people come into our chamber, there's a good chance that they're probably interested in 3 directions. Think of those as possibly being branches of a tree, right? So you come into the chamber, and I would say that there are these 3 paths, and I don't know, we could have a great discussion about, whether you agree or whether you see this a little bit differently. But I would say that most people who are our members are probably on 3 journeys. Grow my business journey, okay? And so in that journey, that member is looking for visibility and networking, but probably not paying out a lot of money. So they may or may not be the big sponsorship types of members. And so we're going to be on their journey, trying to connect them, right, to networks that might make sense for them to grow their business, maybe experts or resources that really help them grow. So the opportunities that we're guiding them to experience is really all around growing my business. Elevate our brand. So there are members who want, because of competition or just because they think the chamber is a smarter way to do this, they're looking to elevate the brand. And I would say a lot of times these are probably our mid-size or our corporate members. And so what are they looking for? Well, obviously looking for the pay-to-play kinds of opportunities, right? We have lots of those. So this is all around helping them tell their story, get in front of their target market, and really give them that high visibility that they're looking for. We want to then connect them with the right audiences, understanding who they want to get in front of, what's important to them, what channels make sense. And we also want them to start to get involved with other leaders and influencers, because hopefully we don't just want to be their marketing agency. We kind of want to be more of their solution, but we understand how they first come in and sort of what that ulterior motive is. We also have people that join the chamber who really have more of that community mindset. And it's really about impacting the community. And for them, it's more about issues and initiatives and tying them more to our strategic plan and the big things we're doing, the behind the scenes kinds of things that we're doing, not just our events, but the community development, economic development types of opportunities. And so we want to take them along this journey so that they understand what it is that we're doing, where are the opportunities where they can really make a difference, the types of initiatives, groups, committees they could be involved with. And obviously we're trying to connect them with other people who are interested and care about the same things, whether it's education or transportation or workforce development, right? And so they're on a different path. And I actually think that you could help your members tell you what journey makes the most sense for them. So how might we do that? I think the way that we do that is certainly paying attention, right? Asking them, why are they choosing to engage with the chamber? Or what's their motivation for engaging with us? And maybe you might show them, hey, is your interest more in growing your business, elevating your brand, or making it, having a community impact? And you could probably even have a poll, or one of the tools that I use is called Lead Quiz, which is an app, a tool that you can use that can integrate with other software. But basically, you just kind of send out like a little questionnaire, and the questions kind of give them an option. But guess what? A, B, or C is either grow my business, elevate my brand, or making a community impact, right? So depending how they answered each of these questions, they're telling you, this is my motivation. This is what I'm interested in. Okay, that's great. And then understanding what their challenges are and what kinds of things that they really want as a goal, for their themselves or their companies. But then people tell you what they want, but more meaningful are the behavioral analytics. So what do they click on in the newsletter? What kinds of, articles are they reading? What web pages do they go to? What are they actually buying or signing up for? Tells you a lot more. This is where Amazon is so great, because, if you fill out a little profile, but then Amazon starts watching what you really do, well, behavior is much more indicative of what you really like, right? So there are tools, and we'll get a little bit more into that in terms of the kinds of tools that you could use for behavioral analytics. But if you think about that, all of that information then should start to tell you what journey is more important for them at this time until their behavior starts to tell you otherwise. So let's get into some steps. So I'm going to give you 5 steps to start to create member journey maps, and then we're going to do a summary and open it up for questions. So your first step, you got to know your audience, right? So identify the different audience segments, spend some time doing the personas first, and really it's some of that data is plentiful in your database. Some demographics in terms of their industry, hopefully the role, if you've captured that in your database for each of the contacts and the companies. Age you may not have, number of employees, you definitely have, right? So think about some demographic information that you already have in your database that you kind of pool so you can kind of get an idea of how many you have of these, different types. And then really spend some time, go back to that previous webinar to come up with maybe, 3 or 4 personas would be a good place to start. Think about their goals. Like I said, go back to that Emily profile, but do the same thing for each of the groups to really think about, what you might know about them, speculate about what you don't know, and then finish that first, okay, because that's a good starting place. And then I would suggest that you create an internal customer experience team, and that are going to be different people in your chamber because you've got your marketing people, you've got your public policy, you have the membership people, and then think about some other people or departments within your organization that probably have some of this customer knowledge that would be important for you because it's not just in the membership department. So bring together this team. And then actually, have a representative or different people that really know the customers the best to come around and to really help to kind of build those personas, but also then think about answering these questions so that they can help to kind of create the journey maps, right? The onboarding, or if you look about the 3 paths, what those paths might be. But I would definitely start with an internal team so that you can pull your knowledge together. Don't do this with just one person or just membership. I think you really need to involve people who know a lot about the different members, and an internal team would be the best thing to do. This is a great little format, and I gave you the earlier example on the decision to join, pretty similar to that. This is kind of just a little bit of a different template. I like this example. It was kind of interesting because they talked about different zones. So zone A, obviously, you've got the photo and a little just short description about the persona, the scenario, they just joined, or maybe the scenario is, you want to tap them for a leadership position, or you want to tap them for, really helping to elevate their brand. So this first zone A is kind of who's the customer, right? And sort of where they are and what kind of journey are you projecting for them, and what are the goals and expectations that you would have for them. And, maybe you just sort of, it's kind of hard for us to think about what we want out of it too. Zone B, the heart of the map, really kind of gets into the phases, right? So we talked about the different phases. So how many phases do you think there are? I would try to keep it to 3 or 4 and not make it too complicated. And then what do you think the different action steps would be? And then again, go back to the entrepreneur Emily and advocate Andy and sort of think about what are the thoughts and feelings going on for the member or prospective member, because you want to keep their thoughts in mind, and then just kind of walk through what this journey map would look like. And then zone C really talks about what are the different opportunities that you're going to make available, what are the touch points, what are the channels, who's doing it, like, so is that marketing, is that membership? So you can kind of create this, and you might do this on an 11 by 17. So after you've done a lot of flip charts and documenting, you can then be able to create this map, just like I showed you that we had done with the prospect to join. You could certainly do this and then kind of build in some different, that whole zone Z part, so that you have one comprehensive journey map that includes what we call back office. And that's really what zone C is talking about. Your step 4, you got to validate it. So now that you've got it written, how do you know that, it's really seen through the member's eyes? Well, you could do that. You could actually create a customer experience task force if you wanted to do that. And those would be probably task forces or small groups that really represent the persona. Now, you could also do one-on-one interviews. Focus groups is another way. So you're kind of showing them the map. You're getting some feedback from them. You could also have them create their own, say, here's the scenario, here's what we think the phases might be. So what do you think would be going on for you, and what would your behaviors be, and what would you want our behaviors or opportunities presented to be. And you might even do a combination of those, but you do need to validate to make sure that what you developed internally really matches up with the people who would be using the map. And I'm sure that they'll give you some great feedback that will then allow you to edit your maps, and hopefully you've taken that feedback to heart and really put together a final map. Your last step, obviously, would be to implement, right? To go ahead and put things into place. And I would suggest that you start first with a really simple one, something that's as is, like your onboarding process or just joining. But pick probably just something that you're already doing now without ever thinking about it as a journey map, but pick something that happens pretty regularly already and focus on that so that you can create more of that better experience for those members, but something that you can actually manage. You might consider just doing a pilot. Maybe you just want to do that for a month, so that you can kind of see how it goes with just a particular group of people. So you don't have to roll it out, just big time, but I'd probably start with something kind of small. Think about how technology comes in. Could you use features of your AMS, right? So if you're using Chamber Master, for instance, or WebLink, a lot of those AMS tools do have the ability to develop multiple emails as a sequence that can actually be triggered automatically, so you can think about that. Lead quizzes that I talked about is another way just to kind of help find out, get people's preliminary information. Is kind of like doing a survey and sort of finding out what people think. You might ask them for a little bit of demographic information so you can kind of compare notes and really understand if you got this right. Automated marketing software. I know just really a handful of chambers that have kind of moved to the HubSpot arena. West Coast Chamber said they were using MailChimp, which is a pretty inexpensive option, but automated marketing software can do this as well. The beauty of HubSpot, Marketo, and some of these other software platforms that can plug in with your AMS is that they're much more robust when it comes to behavioral analytics that can be tracked, but whatever tool you want to use within your budget can certainly be done. That internal customer experience team should really stay together because they're going to help implement it. We need to really understand who's doing what, who's tracking, and being able to share that data, come together, and to really talk about what's working, what's not working, what did you learn, getting feedback. But I would suggest that probably be a core team that's cross-functional that you continue to use as you go through this process. And if it's something you want to do, then you probably want to keep that team or members of that team active. This is not a one-time thing. All right, it's a lot. A lot that we covered, but I really kind of look at this as more of an introductory. Certainly we could do something that's more for people who are already doing this, but my guess is that for most chambers, this is a fairly new endeavor. And so we did want to just keep it where it's digestible, enough for you to think about and be able to take action on. So think about the summary in terms of the maps really being that visual representation, that they're really focused around personas. They have phases to them, and they really kind of give us a good overview of what it is that we're intending the experience journeys to be and how we can make it the very best experience over time, and realize too that depending on where members are in their life cycle with you or their motivation or their changing motivation, their journeys can certainly change as well. I wanted to give you a few resources, and so here's a number of great articles, some that are member-based, some that are not, that really talk about membership mapping, customer mapping, that I think will give you enough of a flavor in terms of what you might be looking for. The first one is the book I was talking about. They do have a free first chapter that you can download, but I think that's probably good enough just to get you started, and I hope that you will think about taking the plunge, or at least getting your feet wet. And my contact information is there if you want to reach out, share some comments, but I know Susan's going to open it up for questions, and I'd be curious to hear what's buzzing in your mind right now.
Okay, well, thank you so much, Kathy. It's great information and great resources. And yes, if you all have any questions, please feel free to type them in the question box. We just have a few minutes, but we'll work through as many as we can get. We do have one question. How would you address a longtime member who has the key chamber contact replaced with a brand new hire? Is that a unique journey map?
You know, I think if that person is the key decision maker, you know, you might even kind of think of that person as being sort of like an indoctrination journey map, in terms of, so this person is brand new to the chamber. And truthfully, I think anybody who first joins the chamber, or if there is a change in leadership, should probably go through sort of that awareness about, you know, who the chamber is, what the chamber does. Again, understanding what that motivation might be for engagement. And truthfully, if you want to just map out, you know, new leadership, right? Okay, if we know there's a new leader at a key company, what would be the steps that we would go through? You know, like would we contact them and set up a meeting? And in that meeting, what would we be trying to do? What information would we want to share? You know, we want to find out what their motivation is. And then what would happen next once we got back to the office? And then how would we then reach out again? And I think you could map that whole thing out. That's interesting, but it could be a different map. And obviously it's not one that a ton of your members are going to go through. However, if you've got the map pre-designed, then everybody knows exactly what needs to happen when there's a new key contact or replacement contact. And I think in doing that would be very, very important. And that's a nice thing, too, about having an internal team. Sometimes the person who knows that there's a change in leadership is not always the person in membership. And so, you know, it could be the president of the chamber. It could be someone else that said, oh, no, I found out that there's someone else. Well, as soon as you know that, then what would be the pre-described actions that you would take? That's a great question.
Okay, we have a couple questions on how a very small staffed chamber can do this process. If you have one or two people or you have a small staffed chamber, how would you recommend, or is it possible to implement a journey mapping program?
Yes. You could definitely do it with a small staff. And again, that's when I would stick to something really simple. Like if you just said, okay, every member that joins is going to have these 10 steps, right? What are those 10 steps? What information are we going to send them? Are we going to, you know, share that they're a new member? And if so, how are we going to do that? And agreeing on what those steps are, and then just making sure that you do them. This is one I would definitely use if you're using ChamberMaster or WebLink, to pre-design those emails so that they can happen automatically. All you have to do is just hook up the sequence and hit launch, because the more that you can use your technology, the less you and the staff have to remember to do, but coming together and doing that first. So kind of starting with something simple like that. And again, looking at MailChimp. MailChimp is a great source to use. It kind of replaces Constant Contact, but what I like about MailChimp is that it can do a lot more than Constant Contact can. Like, in other words, if someone doesn't open an email, it can automatically send out a second email that you created. So even if you're a small staff, just sitting down, pick a process, something that you all want to work on, and map out the steps, and then figure out how you can make that happen, and try to do it in a way that actually saves all of you time.
Okay, one clarification question. To clarify, the staff internal team will create the journey map and then give it to the new members to fill out, or asking a question about that?
Yeah, well, so we talked about validating. The map, and we said there are some different ways that you could do that, right? So just going back to that. So once the internal team has created the map that's as good as they think it should be, then you're thinking about, okay, well, let me go back up. So how are we going to do that? You could have a customer experience team that you could create that, that represents different personas. You could get feedback. So think about, instead of having like a membership committee, maybe this is just a task force that sort of helps you, that represents different personas. That's one way to validate it. You could also do one-on-one interviews with specific groups of members, show them the map, and say, this is a map that we put together for XYZ purpose. Does this resonate with you? Can you help us to refine this map? You could also do the same thing with focus groups, so that would kind of allow you to have fewer one-on-one meetings because you would do it as a group. Or you can have like a membership 101 or a group of members, and you just have the phases, and you can just have the template and have them build the map with you. If you've got some members that have been with you for a while, they're more than happy to give you sort of their take on how they would create the map. But I think if they saw your map and then you asked them to create their own, they could easily do that. It's far much easier to do that when you sort of look at an end product and say, oh, you want us to create that, but our version? Sure. So those are different ways to validate your map and to help you refine it.
Okay, I think we have time for one more question. What was the name of the app or software you mentioned for member feedback and building out profile and interests?
Oh, well, I could talk about some different things. So Lead Quiz is actually a program that you can use. It's a subscription. It allows you to create polls or surveys. And using those polls and surveys and how you set them up. Lead Quiz, LEADQUIZ. And what's nice about a lead quiz is you can post a lead quiz in Facebook or LinkedIn, and people can click on it and actually go to the quiz itself. Better if they're short. People want an example, they can reach out to me because we use lead quizzes all the time. But it's really to kind of find out what people's preferences are. But what's really cool is, especially if you use it for prospecting, so like if it's like, how much do you know about public policy or whatever the quiz is that you want to put out, members or people can take the quiz, and in order to get like if you want them to get the answer, like it's really a quiz, it's like, what's your EQ type of thing. They can take it, they can put their email and name in it in order to get their results, but you get it too. But it's another great way to get member feedback. But what's nice is based on how people choose, you get all of that, all those answers pulled together. You can also link Lead Quiz up with like a MailChimp or HubSpot or other kinds of automated marketing, so that depending on how they answer the quiz, they will get this email campaign, right? So if you said it's about growing my business, then you're going to get Grow My Business email campaign. If your answers say that you're more about elevate our brand, you're going to get a different email sequence. That's the beauty of using a tool like that, is it integrates with other tools that you're using, but you can put all those things together.
Okay, that sounds awesome. Thank you so much, Kathy. I had a few other questions, but we'll reach out to you all, or feel free to reach out directly to Kathy. She has her contact information on this slide. Also, just a reminder, this webinar was recorded, so it will be up on our ACCE webinar page no later than Monday the 15th. And you can get to that by going to our website, www.acce.org, hovering over ACC University Online, and then clicking on webinars. So take a look for this webinar and our many other webinars we have on membership and other topics. We have many there to choose from, and you can click and listen to the recordings and access presentations on that page. Our next live webinar will be on Thursday, April 25th at 2 p.m. East Coast time. And we are talking about sponsorship programs, or rather the team from Greater Louisville will talk about their sponsorship program, including their annual Sponsorship Opportunities Guide, which offers creative and flexible options for members to partner with the Chamber based on their individual budgeting and marketing goals. So I think that's going to be a great webinar. You can register for it on the ACC events page, which you can get to by clicking on professional development, hovering over events, and then navigating to and clicking on upcoming webinars. You'll also get an e-blast about that webinar. So thank you again to Kathy for taking the time to present today's webinar. Thanks to everyone for your participation and interest. We will see you on the next ACC University webinar. Have a great afternoon, everyone. Bye-bye.